Hey folks, in this episode, it's a check-in with Chase Jarvis and CreativeLive. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. Today, we're going to be talking to a good friend of mine. His name is Chase Jarvis, and he started a company you may know of. It's called CreativeLive, and I'm a big fan of CreativeLive for a couple of reasons. The main reason is the business side of my brain loves what they did in terms of trying to disrupt and shake up how online education was delivered. In a nutshell, they started the whole idea of watch it live for free and then pay or subscribe later, and you can, sort of watch the content on demand. I think, as far as I know, they were the first ones to do that. So they've come a long way since the early days of them producing content, and that now we are where we are. So this is sort of a check-in state of the union of CreativeLive and Chase Jarvis. Chase Jarvis, man, welcome to This Week in Photo.
Is this third?
I think this is third. Third or fourth.
Oh, I'll take it. Whatever I can get.
I love it. I love chatting with you because you are almost like a illustration of the Silicon Valley motivated entrepreneur that has an idea, that is talented, knows how to push it, knows how to talk to VCs, also a talented photographer, and push the whole thing forward. And where the company is now is sort of a testament to what you built. So congratulations on that, man. Congratulations. Seriously, I know how hard it is. I mean, let me take that back. I don't know. I don't know how hard it is, but I can imagine how hard it is just doing the little stuff that I'm doing. So where is Creative? Well, let's start with Chase Jarvis. Where are you at now, man? What's the state of Chase Jarvis?
Sure. The state of Chase Jarvis is I'm just really fired up and passionate to help creators and entrepreneurs around the world pursue their passions and live their dreams, and whether that's in career, in hobby, or just in life in general. And CreativeLive is basically in service of that mission and vision, and the fact that we've been able to expand that footprint and grow not just the business, but the soul, the heart of the creator and the community around it. That's what gives me a lot of juice. So I'm disproportionately focused on that. We originally met probably more than 10 years ago when I was 100% focused on the world of photography. I had a full-time videographer follow me around this idea of vlogging and stuff. I was doing that in 2005. Back before YouTube. It was Google Video back then.
Wow.
But just trying to help tell the story of the creator and really put a lens on the creator's life. And at first for me, it was specifically photography, dragging people all over the world with me on photo shoots for some of the world's biggest brands. And I think that's when we first met, and I still have that part of my soul completely intact. I still will take a creator gig if it's really interesting with a great brand, or there's something that's really new and dynamic where I feel like I can get in and get my hands dirty and learn something new in the process. And yet, I would say the majority of my time, without exception, is focused on helping bring CreativeLive and just the awareness about creativity, the creator, and lifelong learning to the forefront to everybody who's interested. And now, again, this little thing that was launched originally or I guess concepted on a whiteboard in my photo studio, something like 8 years ago now, is now, we've got well north of 10 million people on the platform. Jeez. And we've got more than 10,000 hours of learning content from all the best names in photography and in design, and even in entrepreneurship. I think photographers, we're all entrepreneurs, or those of us who aspire to make a living or some side hustle there. And so having folks on the platform like Richard Branson and Mark Cuban, Ariane Huffington, folks like Brene Brown, trying to expand the footprint of how creators can think about not just their businesses, but their lives too. So it's been a crazy ride, man. I don't identify as like a Silicon Valley dude, although I've spent the last 5 years, working out of there pretty regularly. I just think of myself as a creator who's trying to build a cool community and help people do their stuff.
That is cool. Yeah. And you kind of answered one of my questions, and that was, are you shooting now? And I kind of had I had an inkling that you were still shooting, but you are at a level now where you can just say, you know what? Yeah, I want to pick and choose the projects that most excite me that you can do, versus I got to take everything that's thrown at me because I got to pay rent and my car payment, right?
For sure. And it's really important to establish that I have lived that trajectory. There was a time where I was trading film for food. You know, it's like, do I like develop this raw film, or do I eat? And you know, have had some good fortune and a lot of hard work along the way allowed me to experience photography at a high level. And so, yeah, there is still the occasional thing. And what I usually like to do is if I can incorporate CreativeLive into the mix, to me that's an extra win. I recently directed a series for Starbucks, a YouTube series, for example. Directed it and hosted it, and that was exploring the top YouTube creators in the world. Nice. So, you know, a project like that, if I can incorporate a gigantic world-class brand, CreativeLive's mission and vision, my individual work as a creator, those are the things that I tend to say yes to. And but it's so present here, and of course the best camera is the one that's with us. Yep. So,
Are you're the guy who coined that phrase, right? The best camera, and you wrote that. It was an ebook that you put out, or was it a physical book?
It was the first book in the world of iPhone pictures, shot on the iPhone 1 and 2, and then launched the app, which was the first photo app in the world that allowed you to take a picture, add a cool effect, and then share it to social networks. So, which ended up being a pretty popular thing to do, like, apparently.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, it might be a fad, Chase. I don't know.
I got my ass handed to me. We were the app of the year in 2009 for Apple. Just exploded the global photo sharing craze, and then crushing us a couple of years later. And when they sold for $1 billion, I'm not going to lie, it stung a little bit. It stung
a little bit. Yeah.
Just $1 billion worth.
Whatever. That's pocket change. You can find that in the couch cushions, man. Well, you know, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about business, and the evolution of CreativeLive, and where, like you said, back in your studio when you were, whiteboarding and saying, wouldn't it be cool if ... and then now fast forward a little bit, there was venture, I want to say at least 2 rounds of venture funding that you guys went through, and then now you like I said in the beginning, you sort of diversified out from just photography into several other business and creative verticals. Where is the business now? Where does it stand?
We've got more than 2,000 classes, 25,000 lessons, and 10,000 hours. And we're always sort of curating that like a bonsai tree too, so it stays really relevant. And that's all created with the teachers, the instructors are the best in the world in each of those, in not just photo, as you said, but photo, video, art and design, music and audio, the craft and the maker worlds, and then an area that we call money and life, which is sort of entrepreneurship. And it helps you make a living and a life in any of those other categories that I mentioned. And that's a very rapidly growing category for us. So, that's a little bit about sort of the metric part of it. I think the soulful part of it, which is the part that I really connect and resonate with, is that we're fulfilling our mission. We want to be the go-to place for creative education. And what was, was a little spark of an idea in my photo studio, 10 years ago. And now I think, some of those metrics that we talked about, we've had billions and billions of minutes consumed. Like that starts to feel like scale. And I never really, I try not to get to think too much about that, but I really think about how we are serving this creator community. And I think it's just so cool that creators today, like creativity and photography, those used to be sort of fringy things, 10 or 15 years ago. And now it's like, we got lucky with the timing.
You did,
sure. Yeah. And I'd rather be lucky than good. So we checked that box.
Yeah, I'd say, but you gotta, the humility is good, but it's also luck, timing, and then the ability to act on that luck and timing.
Yeah, look at these dark circles under my eyes.
Exactly.
This stuff does not come for free.
Yeah.
No, it's just a very, very hardworking and talented crew at CreativeLive, and people are committed to the journey and the lifestyle of creators. It's just, again, that's why I feel like whether you said you wanted to shift the conversation to business, and whether, to me, like the photo shoots that are the craziest ones I've been on with the Nikes and the Apples and all that stuff, it feels very much like what we're doing at CreativeLive is. It doesn't feel different. It feels the same. Building this business is a wickedly creative act, and we are in service of a vision and a mission. As an individual creator, you're in service of your creative vision, and now it's just sort of more of a team vision. And we do have venture capital. We raised, just north of $50 million, and we put that to use to make the world's best, learning content for creators. So there's so many parallels. Whether I'm, on a photo shoot or building CreativeLive, it all feels like art. It's kind of it's an interesting epiphany as a pure sort of creator.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy who gets in the weeds on the P&Ls and the line items. That's not my strength. I surround myself with people who have those strengths. I'm just intrigued now in this sort of role, looking at how similar that it's all art.
Yeah. And it's interesting to look at the industry, the creative industry, from the outside looking in, right? Because I'm very much a consumer of the stuff that CreativeLive does. But there's been a lot of other players that have popped up in the wake of CreativeLive. There's, and some that have kind of gone away, right? I mean, you look at Lynda, which was, I would imagine, a major competitor. They haven't gone away, but they've sort of morphed into part of a larger organization. Yeah. And then there's, Masterclass and RGG EDU. There's all these different entities out there where, speaking specifically about the photography genre, where people can go to get their fix on creative education. How has that affected you? Does the increase in competition motivate you? Does it dissuade you? Like, how does it make Chase feel at the end of the day?
That's a good question, and my answer is pretty simple. Like, there are a handful of spaces in the world where it's not a zero-sum game. Mm-hmm. And learning is definitely one of those things. People learn in different ways. They want to learn from different people, different business models, and just providing the vehicle. I'm very happy to have, not dissimilar to, making the iPhone app, right? We were the first one that did it at scale and allowed people to take a picture, add an effect, and share it to this thing called a social network.
Yeah.
Would I have liked the $1 billion? Sure. but it was part. And it's also the biggest mistakes I've ever made were around some of the business things there. But CreativeLive, I think very similarly of it. Like, the fact that, do I want to continue to grow and win the hearts and minds and wallets of the people who want to learn? Of course. But it's not like there can't be other players. And, and even the individual photographers now have the ability to make their own classes and sell them on their own world. And if to us, we don't have a contract that prohibits that. We're very creator friendly. You can, to me, that's a signal of our true intention. If we wanted to corner something or whatever, we would have a different agreement. But, I've always been, my mentality has always been around abundance, and that's always panned out really well. And so the reality is that I've always believed in abundance. And anytime I've been in service of abundance, and by that I mean that there's enough for everybody. We don't have to be competitive and create some sort of walled garden that doesn't play nicely with others. That if we just, create for the people who want to tap into what it is that we're doing, that everything's going to work out. And I think that's, it's largely played out true. And that photographers can go off and make their own. That's great. But I think usually what they find is that they have to become an online marketer, then they have to have their own video team, and then they have to have a whole new section of their site, and they have to have, it's just like, we always want to provide that service for them. So the competition, I think it's good for business, it's good for the industry and the world, and that's how, if our mission and vision is to be the best place in the world to learn anything for creators, that's what we continue to strive for. But it doesn't have to come at the cost of other people not being successful. The reality is it's a hard business, and so that's why you've seen a lot of people come in and go away. Mm-hmm. But man, bring it on. I think creativity is the thing that I'm trying to champion in the world, and that's what CreativeLive stands for. And more of that, it equals better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I don't know if you know, but I was working on the board at Brooks Institute right up until the demise of Brooks Institute. And I can tell you, in several meetings that we had, you and your company came up, right?
Yeah, like, how do we do
Yeah, how do we do that? We need to be more like that. And, and then they went away. So looking at that, looking at the demise of Brooks Institute, which was a sort of a stalwart in the world of photography. Yeah, photography education. Is that over? Are the days of brick and mortar photography, degrees and education and that sort of thing, is it all over? And photographers that feel like they have the aptitude for this stuff, they can get everything they need to know from CreativeLive? What do you think about that?
I think it's more about your individual learning style. It will never fully go away. I think brick and mortar is now more oriented around community than it is around actual the schooling part of it. Mm-hmm. And to me, it really boils down to A, what's your budget, and B, what environment do you learn in? Do you prefer a dynamic, multifaceted, or do you need to sit, in an individual learning style? Do you need to sit down and be told what to do and then go do it and then get critiqued? And then, there's all kinds of upside, like the critique, or crit, as they call it in art school or at the Brooks Institute or wherever, is really valuable because you listen to people's work gets critiqued and then you can sort of apply that to your own. So you can now find that stuff online, or that's the benefit that an in-person community that maybe you started online, but then you move into that. That's the benefit there. So to me, just the economics are obvious, and you've seen the demise of things like the Brooks Institute, and you see this with a lot of other 50% of the colleges that exist in the United States today are going to be gone in 15 years.
Yeah,
50%,
50%, right?
50.
Wow.
And that's not to say that higher education is not going away. It's just that the folks who were sort of just in the middle of the pack are not going to be able to have their industry or their school is not going to be able to survive as people funnel into areas of specialization. And to me, just finding a learning, platform and path that is diverse, that challenges you and supports you as a creator in a community sense as well, which is one of the things that the benefits of CreativeLive, for example, mm-hmm. like that's a huge part of the future. It does sort of, I'm sad to see anything that has been an icon go away, but this is the thing with progress, right? Nothing can escape, nothing is immune. And so the ability to continue to look forward is required, not just in business, but in our individual lives as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think staying nimble, and that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about the process of building CreativeLive. It hasn't been easy, it hasn't been linear, but it's very forward. Like, what does the future feel like, and how do we want to create the future that we want to live in?
Yeah, and I think that the future, there's this whole internet thing you may have heard of, right? So it's the great democratizer of the planet, right? So, when I look at brick and mortars, and this is going back to the conversations at Brooks Institute, part of the conversation was part of Brooks's Achilles heel was the fact that it's, it was located in Santa Barbara, which is very expensive, and students had to relocate to go there, versus these online entities that were delivering a similar, even superior education in photography, and you could do it in your underwear, right? Sitting on your laptop. Yeah, in Ohio. So, it's I think that's part of the big change right there, is just the democratization of e-learning, powered by the internet. So, Chase, here's another question for you. People that are watching this are thinking, yeah, I've heard of CreativeLive. There's Chase Jarvis. Here's my chance. I want to be on CreativeLive. I'm a photographer. I have something to teach, or I'm a cook, or I'm a accountant, or whatever. What are your criterion for getting on CreativeLive? Who's the kingmaker over there?
Don't call me, first of all. No, the reality is that we have two ways of thinking about it. One is a data-driven way, and the other is a human curation way. And the data is really around, like, what is the world saying it wants more of? Mm-hmm. What is, and that's internet queries, but it's also like, what is our community at CreativeLive, the millions of people that are in our world telling us that they want more of, either through search or through requesting classes. And we try and listen to that community. That's, rule one of helping build a community is like listen to what they have to say and try and support it. So
Yep.
that's one way. And then what we try and do is say, what's the fastest growing area of design right now is experience design. And we know that from the data. But the way that we would think about experience design is like, okay, great. The community is telling us they want that. Who are the best people in the world at experience design? Do any of them teach? What are the best selling books? And then, we either have a relationship with those people already, or we're just a phone call away. And prioritizing people who are not just sort of book smart at it, but who are really practicing and are practitioners and are the best in the world. That's the bar, and it's quite high.
Yeah.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Yeah. Good. When I had a question, I know you Alexandra Nicky, she runs Resource
Sure.
Magazine, right? So
Sure.
I was talking with Alex the other day. I don't know if it was in person at WPPI or in an interview, but we were talking about the idea of the metric of social footprint as it applies to this sort of king making thing. This was in relation to getting in Resource Magazine at the time, right? So I was asking her, does it matter if I'm an excellent photographer? My work is just trend setting. It's next generation. It's beautiful. I know my stuff, but I only have 3 followers, versus someone who's mediocre or maybe okay, and they've got 100,000 followers. Does that affect the decision-making process? In other words, is it about the creativity, or is it about the marketing potential of the potential, instructor? What do you think?
Sure. I love the question, first of all. And I think the answer is a little bit nuanced, but having lived this through my own experiences, through the CreativeLive world, and then just through pop culture in general. I'm a huge consumer of pop culture, and I try and understand it. A lot of the art that I do, separate from building the business, is around pop culture. And the element that I think is missing is when people are sitting at home like, hey, I like photography. How could I make some money? Well, that's great. I think you should aspire to that if making money is one of your objectives. Awesome. Here's how that world works. And I usually try and paint a picture for people that being great at the craft is actually a requirement. That's like the getting in the door. Mm-hmm. Now, what is great? That's like, depends. You maybe you're the greatest in your neighborhood, or the greatest in the city, or the greatest in the, whatever geography you're trying to draw the circle around. But being great is a requirement. And so if you want to be as, in the pages of the magazines, having great work is a requirement. Now, there's someone, again, that same person sitting in Ohio in their underwear, maybe throwing rocks at them like, oh man, I'm so much better. Mm-hmm. Well, are you getting your work out there? Is your work in front of other people? Because being great in your mom's basement doesn't really help anybody, and certainly doesn't help you. Yeah. The same is true for professional golf. You can say, I'm the best golfer. I'm so much better than those folks that I see on TV. Like, okay, then go do it.
Right, yeah.
Because the market actually selects. I had people say, oh man, I'm so much better than Chase Jarvis. Like, okay, good. Go do it for 15 years and have people put $1 million budgets behind you, and you have to deliver over and over and over and over and over and over. It's like, there's no such world where you get to do that and suck and people don't talk about it.
Right.
There's a criteria. Now, it's so true that I think this is the other part. If the quality of your work or your craft, and again, it's not just about a craft, the craft of the photo, because if you're on set, you have to be able to manage people. People have to get along with you. There's all these other criteria that are at play. Yep. That I think go largely underrepresented unless you if it's required that your skills are good, and you can only pretend for so long because you'll get found out, then it starts to be so many of the other aspects. And those are the aspects that most people don't develop. Mm-hmm. And it's what limits their growth. And this is like self-development around, managing people, communication skills. In order to sell someone on an expensive vision, you have to be able to communicate that vision. So communication, yes. These things are to a casual observer are not photography, but they're life. And we're living, breathing human beings. And the reality is that if you hire a photographer, you have to actually interact with them. You have to like working with them. And, you know, the vast array of things it takes to be, I'll just in this case say world class, or to get in the pages of Resource Magazine or on the, you know, This Week in Photo podcast. You know, it's, you know, and I think we can't undersell that. That's a part that's widely misunderstood.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think you hit it right on the head, because there's a lot of just facets to everything, like you said, nuances, right? So I look at it because my brain is full of analogies, right? So I look at it as an iceberg, and everyone only sees the tip of the iceberg above the waterline. Like, here's Chase Jarvis and his body of work, but below the waterline is all the stuff it took to get to that point. The communication skills, the interpersonal skills, the networking skills, the ability to talk to VCs and do Jedi mind trick on them. You know, all that stuff comes together and supports the tip of the iceberg. Right. And people that only see the tip of the iceberg and say, oh, that's nothing, I can do that. Like TWiP, right? It's like, oh, I could do that. Sure, you could. How many years have you been doing it? Yeah, exactly. 10 years. So
who can do anything for 10 years?
Right. Exactly. If you can do anything for 10 years, then you're going to be good at it. Right. And keep it up and sustain it, because you can't fake for 10 years. You cannot fake. And I think that's
if it sucked and no one would listen, you wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So there's some natural filters in there that I think people don't understand. And while you might want it to be one way, the world or the market or however you want to look at it, you know, that's part of the decision matrix.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up. I want to get some data. I know, you know, of course, I know you can't talk about future-facing things that haven't been released and all that, yada, yada, yada. So I know that. But to the extent of what you can talk about for the future direction of CreativeLive, where are things going? You know, are we looking at, you know, acquisitions? Are you going to start gobbling up other smaller companies? Or are we going to see new vectors and new business models? What's happening?
Well, as far as acquisitions and stuff, that's definitely not a playground that we can talk about. But yeah. I can talk about the way that we think about our community, and that's in continuing to support them across, you know, multiple different learning styles. You know, the Chase Jarvis Live podcast, the one that I've been doing for 10 years with other amazing guests, Richard Bransons and the Brene Browns and the Ariana Huffingtons, and people who are not just in photography. Of course, I have photographers, but building a very broad spectrum from which we can draw inspiration. The fact that so the CreativeLive, or the Chase Jarvis Live podcast, is on CreativeLive. We have another one called We Are Photographers on CreativeLive. So podcasting is something that's emerging there. You mentioned business models. We recently rolled out a thing that we call the Creator Pass. Sure, you can still buy an individual class on CreativeLive, but the Creator Pass, the ability to subscribe to everything, it's hugely growing area of our business, and a lot of our community are flocking to that, and it's a great value, and it's just growing quickly, and that's a business model that we heard that you wanted. You can still buy a class, an individual class, but if you want to, you know, pursue some longer thread of learning, then, you know, we made that available, and also just the rise of creativity in the mind share and the zeitgeist is something that we're really well aware of. And so we have a CreativeLive for business. And that's, if you are a photo studio of 5 or 10 people and you want a subscription, you can do that now through CreativeLive. That it's not like you have to buy a class and your office mate has to buy a class, and you can subscribe as a studio. And that's been hugely successful. And we also support some big enterprise clients as well, as photography and or more broadly creativity and the way to like design thinking and to be an entrepreneur, even if you're inside, you know, some of those other large market cap companies or bigger companies. If you have a company that you work at, and say you work in the design team at Uber, like, you know, we support huge swaths of the design community. We Red Bull, all their, you know, photography and video is a huge part of that. And so, you know, we support Red Bull photographers all over the world. And there's, you know, hundreds of examples. So if you're a small or medium business, that's a thing for you. The creator pass, the subscription is a thing for you, and otherwise we'll also just keep delivering the thing we have.
I love it. I love it. Well, Chase Jarvis, thank you so much for coming on, man. You are sorry, we were breaking up a little bit. I'm going to leave a space here for the edit. 1 second and start. So Chase Jarvis, thank you so much for coming on, man. This is, like every time I talk to you, I come away from the conversation inspired and excited and, feeling a little bit bad about myself because...
What? We just talked about how you've been doing this thing for 10 years.
I am, but I'm not getting millions of dollars in venture capital and changing the world here, I'm making a little clean spot over in my little corner of the world, But you guys are crushing it. So congratulations on that. That's amazing. And I think the time metric that we hit on before is the longevity of from where you were, from whiteboard to all the things that you just talked about and the trajectory of the business. You got to feel good about that, right? You got to feel good going to bed at night saying, like, this is what I built and this is where this thing is going. So, yeah. So if people want to connect with Chase Jarvis and they want to see some of the work that you've done or that you are doing personally beyond CreativeLive.com, where should they go?
I'm basically Chase Jarvis on all the sites, Insta, YouTube, etc. I think subscribing to the podcast is a good thing. You can just chasejarvis.com/podcast. But again, I think hopefully I can, maybe be a bright spot on another individual creator that you follow. But truly, CreativeLive is it's special. I think there's an opportunity because its sole purpose is unlocking yours. Mm-hmm. I think that's they're just CreativeLive, on all the platforms as well. And check it out. And it's all, if you don't have any money, it's not like there's something playing on all of the channels 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where you don't have to spend a penny.
That's crazy.
The podcasts are free, and you're with, millions and millions of other creators and consuming billions of minutes of learning, and you don't have to pay a dime if you don't have the money. If you want to own it and watch it on your own schedule, the business model that you talked about earlier, then we're there for you.
I love it.
We're there for you either way.
I love it. All right, I'm going to throw you one last curveball before we end this interview.
Ooh.
All right, you ready? All right, brace yourself. So, I drew the analogy or the comparison between you and sort of the classic Silicon Valley entrepreneur, which you resisted a little bit, but I'll let you go. But the classic Silicon Valley entrepreneur are, many of them are serial entrepreneurs, meaning they'll start a project, it will either fail or succeed, and then they'll leave it and go on and start something else and then rinse and repeat, sort of Tarzaning, for a couple of decades or so. Would you consider yourself a serial entrepreneur or more of a monogamous entrepreneur where you're married till death do you part to CreativeLive? Or where would you sit in that?
Yeah, I find that what I have always done, and the way that you can answer this question is you can either listen to me right now or you can actually look at my history and connect the dots, right? And what I have a history of doing is building something that's a home base and then innovating around it. Like I built a very successful career as one of the top commercial photographers out there, early on. And that was my end all be all. And I got so much belief and passion and value, both, personally and professionally and from the community, that I was like, these are my people. And then I did a photo app, which is kind of building a tool. And then I did a learning platform, which is a way of engagement opportunity and a personal development platform. And then, so the way I would answer the question is I don't see myself running off and I've never chased a market opportunity in my life. People told me that when making an app for the iPhone in 2008, they told me I was crazy, but I pursued the things that were meaningful to me and the areas where I had an itch that needed to be scratched. And so it just so happens that all those things for me are around the things that I've already been doing. So if you look at my trajectory as an individual creator, everything's going to be in that world. I will never chase a random market opportunity. I mean, I'm investing in some restaurants and some startups and stuff that are friends of mine, but like that's not something that I personally would pursue. I want to pursue the things that are in the world where I can both personally create for a living in the life that I want and help as many other people as possible do that. So no market chasing for me. It's all going to be in this sweet little area, and the end goal is that all those things help one another in aggregate, and that the rising tide will float them all up, including other learning platforms and other photographers and creators and entrepreneurs. That's just the abundance mindset that I try and carry with me.
I love it. Chase Jarvis, man, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure, always an honor, always inspirational. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate being on the show. Keep doing what you're doing.
Will do. Take care, man. This is TWiP.